Hello, friends, and welcome. I'm your co-host, Andrew Lazaga, here with Dubside.
And you're listening to the Dubcast with Dubside.
Okay, well, we've had quite a nice run of interviews.
Uh-huh.
Well, you've had a nice run of interviews. And I thought we could go over some comments that people have left.
Okay.
One listener wants to know if you have read the book Arctic Dreams, Imagine and Desire in a Northern Landscape by Barry Lopez.
Yeah, Barry Lopez. Yeah, it's been a long time since I read that one. I'm trying to remember what it was specifically, the points the guy made, but I've read that. It's just been a long time. I should read it again.
Do you recommend it?
I can't remember. I read that with a bunch of other books, and some of them were very interesting. Some of them weren't. And some of them were kind of boring. But I think the guy definitely. I think he had a lot of experience in the Arctic. He knew what he was talking about. I've lost track of what exactly he was saying.
Okay. And we're going all the way back to Dubcast number 51 about Emmanuel Corneliusson.
Mm-hmm.
Elon Harrell, who we've heard from before, left a comment. I get Peningawak. I always feel uncomfortable when I hear Greenland kayak, Greenland paddle, etc. The Inuit call Greenland Kalashlit
Nunat.
Kalashlit Nunat.
Okay, yeah.
Kayaks were developed by the Inuit, Yupik, and Aleut. They are indigenous to the Arctic, but not to Canada and Greenland, where they replaced the Dorset and the Norse. Eric the Red, Norse, founded Greenland in the 10th century. The Dorset existed for 3,000 years in northern Canada and Greenland. The Inuit immigrated from Alaska and arrived in the 13th century to northern Canada and Greenland. Inuit means the people. Inuk is a person, and Inuktut is the language of the Inuk. They live in Inuit Nunangat, which means the place where Inuit live. And I think from this comment, he's pointing out that the Norse were in Greenland before the Inuit. And this brings up the whole question of what does indigenous mean in this sense?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of, maybe I'm incorrect in thinking, the Inuit include the Dorset. So in that sense, the Inuit were way before the Eric the Red showed up. But the archaeological evidence that I'm familiar with, the Dorset culture pretty much died out before, was that like 1000? And then the current, the Thule people, that's the current Inuit, they came after Eric the Red was already there.
Okay. Well,
but there were indigenous people in Greenland way before, long before the Norse got there. They died off or stopped being there in between, and then the current day people came there. That's what I know.
Well, the first time I heard about this was in Jared Diamond's book Collapse. And he has a great chapter on Greenland.
Yeah, I've read that.
Yeah, and how the Norse they established colonies as if they were living in Europe. So they were raising cattle and building churches and houses out of wood, and eventually depleted Greenland of trees and topsoil because the topsoil was so thin. And interestingly, they did not eat fish, and that contributed to their eventual demise. They eventually starved and left. He thought that there was some kind of cultural taboo against eating fish.
Yeah. His analysis sort of relies on that, but there are other factors involved, and you can argue it a bunch of different ways. The weather changed some; it got colder. With that little ice age thing, that was that factor. There may have been actual battles with the Inuit there, and people got wiped out. There could have been a number of things, so it's hard to say exactly.
The culture of the Dorset and the Inuit was, I think there are some significant differences between the two.
Yeah.
And I think one of them was the presence of kayaks.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, if the Dorsets had kayaks, they were much more primitive. If they had anything that floated, it wasn't nearly as well developed as the Thule people's kayaks.
So getting back to Peningawak and Emmanuel Corneliusson. This may be a bit controversial, and I usually don't like to introduce controversial topics into this, but you can't help it dealing with this issue when cultural appropriation comes up.
Yeah.
But from listening to Peningawak, the granddaughter of Emanuel Cornelissen, who built Ken Taylor's kayak, upon discovering the whole story of her grandfather building this kayak, which later basically became highly influential in the sport of sea kayaking in Britain, she had this mix of emotions of anger, sadness, pride.
Yeah.
What do you think she was angry about?
Oh, that her grandfather didn't get any benefit from the influential thing they did. And if he had gotten, say, royalties or something like that, he wouldn't have had to split up his family and have his kids go into foster care. I think that would be a main thing. Her whole life, and her parents and everything would have been different if he'd been able to support his family and keep them all together.
Yeah.
And he certainly did enough work to deserve that. But that's why he got burned on that deal. That's not too cool.
Yeah, it's a tragedy what happened
Yeah.
to him. However, it's I don't know whether royalties were something that would have been expected in that situation. Do you think that she feels that something was taken from her grandfather?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, whether you want to call it royalties or whatever, but the recognition and the credit and everything, that's. I mean, he totally got the short end of the stick. They took his kayak and went somewhere else. People made money off of it and used it without even knowing that he had done anything or given him any sort of credit, whether it was credit by word of mouth or credit by actual money coming to him. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, another way you could see it is he made a deal with Ken Taylor to build this kayak.
yeah,
And there weren't any restrictions like on what Ken Taylor could do with his kayak after he got it. Maybe there wasn't any belief that a design belonged to anybody. There wasn't any belief in intellectual property rights with regard to
yeah,
the kayak design. Maybe that wasn't even something that people were thinking about at the time. After all, somebody had to teach him how to build this kayak.
mm-hmm.
And I'm sure he based his kayaks on previous designs. The other thing I wanted to mention is that it seems to be the fashion these days to divide the world up into two kinds of people, and that is the oppressor and the oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
And the oppressed tend to be people of color, people who've been colonized.
Mm-hmm.
But personally, I don't buy into the idea of collective guilt. For instance,
Mm-hmm.
all white people should feel guilty about the genocide of the indigenous people in North America or slavery of Africans who were brought over into America. What do you think of the idea of collective guilt?
Well, I can see the point that even if you didn't carry out any of these acts that happened however long ago before you were born, you're still getting the benefit of all that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you can't ignore that. And just pretending that everything's fine now, it doesn't exist anymore, just sort of ignores that fact. And that's what is very annoying and offensive to people who do feel that they still suffer from the residue of these things. So there's that.
Yeah. It's a really complicated, sticky issue.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I thought I'd bring it up because I like to hear more from what other people think about the whole issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With Emanuel Corneliussen's kayak, even if he didn't get any money out of it, if his name stayed on that kayak, and it's not called the Acuta, it's called the Corneliussen. I got the Corneliussen. You got the Corneliussen. That like a Les Paul guitar. Even if Les Paul never got a dime for it or died when he was young or something like that, every one of those guitars has the name Les Paul right on the top of it. And so he's got credit for that, and his name lives on, and that's what's missing in the Emanuel Corneliussen story, even if there's no money changing hands.
Yeah. If anybody is at fault here, it's the people at Valley Canoe and
Yeah.
Kayaks who took the design and made their kayak, the Acuta. However, they do give Emanuel Corneliussen credit on their website. They also say that if it was not for them recreating the kayak in fiberglass with a fore and aft, watertight compartments, then it wouldn't have been successful.
Mhm.
So it's like if someone took Ken Taylor's kayak and reproduced it in skin on frame and sealskin, then it wouldn't have been a popular commercial product. So they
Well,
they added
that's
to it, right?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it might not have been as popular. It's still a good design. It still stands on its own. I mean, you can't say unequivocally that if they hadn't done that, that kayak would have gone anywhere because you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know.
Yeah. To put all the guilt on them is, they're manufacturers. They're trying to make money. Somebody had design. They used to design. The guy who, in that lineage there was somebody. People were making versions of that before Valley got to it. So there was a number of people in the chain involved there, and just everyone passing on to the next person. Nobody said, well, maybe we should give more credit to the guy who did this, because you don't think about that. You just, here's a kayak, looks performs well. Let me just use it, and I'll pass it on to the next person.
I guess my point is, I would be wary of judging the past by the standards of the present.
All right,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sure that for Parninguak, she is really proud of what her father did. But as I said, like with Les Paul did not invent the electric guitar entirely. There are plenty of other cool guitars, very influential. The Fender Stratocaster is a big you'd say that Les Paul had nothing to do with. But the guitar that he designed that did spawn all these Les Pauls, he was the man behind that. And Emanuel Corneliusson didn't invent kayaks and didn't invent the ultimate sea kayak, but the one he did invent was very influential and had, neither of those people are totally responsible for the whole field of their specialty, but they were just very influential in that field.
Yep. Well, all right. So do you have any announcements?
So I haven't run out of ideas yet for new podcasts, but I did have an idea for, I want to do a best of compilation. I mean, we're up to, we're 50 episodes now. So to go back and listen to all of them, you really have to be dedicated, or I'm not expecting everybody to do that. So if you're just coming on board more recently, we want to make a best of compilation. Here's some key moments in the past 50 episodes of really cool things that happened, or either people I talked to or things I talked about or whatever. So I could go through these things and find my favorite moments, but no, I want to hear from the listeners. What are your favorite moments? So we need everybody to tell us what the best parts they've heard, in a little segment, and then I'll put together one or maybe two episodes of just running through all those. So in one episode you can hear all your cool favorite pieces rather than have to go back through and find them all.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. It's going to be hard for me to think of what are my favorite.
Yeah, well, you can
moments.
use the index to find things you might have forgotten about where it is. Or even if you don't remember where it is, just say, what that time you said this or that.
Does that include the special guest interviews?
Oh
as
yeah,
well?
yeah, all that, anything that was
Yeah.
anything that we did. Yeah, whatever.
Okay, so without further ado, here's number 52 on winter camping tricks.
Welcome to the Dubcast with Dubside. This is Dubcast number 52. Sleeping warm in the wintertime and the importance of a good sleeping pad if you're going to be outside. Music this week comes from a woman in Greenland named Dida, D-I-D-A, and she had a big hit more than 10 years ago called Acuta Nuanasut. Well, when I was a kid, I was in the Boy Scouts, and we learned the usual Boy Scout skills of camping and outdoor stuff. And we were going to go camping one time. I think the Scoutmaster was trying to extend the season a little bit, so we hadn't been into really cold weather camping yet, but we're working on it. So he had a friend with some land way out in the rural areas. I think they did deer hunting on this land. There was a hunting lodge there or something. But he had arranged that we would camp on a different part of the property, had permission for that. So it was a long couple hours to drive all the way out there. And me not really knowing about warm, I wore a winter jacket, so I'm ready for the winter. And under that, I had my regular, like a t-shirt, long sleeve t-shirt maybe, and my cheap little thin pants and crummy socks. But I didn't know anything about dressing in layers. So that particular weekend, we were going to be there from Friday to Sunday. It got really cold. This big temperature, low depression kicked in. And it got down to maybe I think in the teens, maybe the single digits at night in Fahrenheit. And I remember it was cold. And so the scoutmaster would tell us, okay, we have things to do now. You guys, we need you guys to go cut some firewood and you guys to go dig a latrine and you guys get the tent set up. And anything he would ask us to do, we had a fire made pretty quickly, but we would go do just a teeny little token amount of it and just come right back to the fire, like moths to the flame. It was just so cold. All you could do was sit there and huddle shivering by the fire. But eventually we got the tent set up and the campsite ready to go. So the temperature continued to fall. And then at night, I remember, so I had a sleeping bag. See, the Boy Scouts is an interesting mix of socioeconomic backgrounds. So you had guys like me in the solid middle class, going in the Boy Scouts, and then we're going to do a camp out, and you tell your parents, well, I need a sleeping bag, so they go to the sporting goods store and they buy you a sleeping bag. It's not the high-tech, top-of-the-line goose-down one, but just a decent sleeping bag. There were other kids in our troop who did not have those kind of resources. And so they would show up. Their mother it was like some brothers. Their mother had she had sewn, like quilting kind of thing, a sleeping bag for them. And this worked fine in the summer months, but as we got into the winter, it had its shortcomings. So we go to bed at night, and it is cold, and we're shivering, and I'm shivering in my sleeping bag. And the scoutmaster, he's got to keep track of everybody. And he stayed up all night trying to keep the guys with the homemade sleeping bags warm. And he did that. This is a Boy Scout thing. You take rocks and you put them in the fire. They have to be rocks not from a stream, otherwise they'll explode because of the moisture inside them. So you need very dry rocks from a dry place. You get them really hot in the fire. And then you wrap them. You want a nice round one, but you wrap it in some newspaper or something like that, just to dissipate the heat a little bit. And then you put the hot rock in a sleeping bag, down by your toes or something. Then it keeps the sleeping bag warm. And if it's really cold, you do multiple rocks in a bag. So he was up all night heating rocks in the fire and then putting them in the kids with the homemade sleeping bags to try to keep them warm. And so we got up in the morning, and then we had to spend all Saturday. I think Saturday afternoon it got up to maybe 20 degrees or so. That is 20 degrees Fahrenheit. It was so warm we went out for a hike. But later on it got cold again. And I remember it was kind of brutal. There was one kid was crying because it was so cold and the tears were freezing to his face. And I learned about, so we were being young kids, we were squeamish about things like long underwear, looks like women's clothing, like a leotard thing or something like that girls would wear. But when it got that cold, I'd have put anything on. I'd have worn stockings. I didn't care. So the older scouts who knew how to dress in layers, they had no problem. They had long underwear on and sweaters and things underneath their jacket and coats, and they were quite fine. So we learned some quick lessons about how to dress in layers and not to be worried about long underwear. That was so long ago. I remember the sleeping bag I had. It wasn't a great one, but it was warmer than a blanket or two. But I think I had an air mattress, like one of those beach kind of things. You blow it up full of air. And I didn't realize back then that an air mattress doesn't really give you any insulation, because when you put it on the cold ground, the air inside it, say it's 2 or 3 inches thick, there's nothing in there to stop the air from moving. And little air currents develop that are pulling the warm air off your body and exchanging it with the cold air on the ground, and it'll just suck the heat right off you from underneath. And a sleeping bag, like a down bag, lofts up to like 2 or 3 inches of insulation. But when you lay on top of it, underneath you, it's just compressing it to thin, and it doesn't give you any insulation. If you've ever slept on those inflatable beds that people buy for in case they have guests coming over, it's like you blow it up with an electric pump, because it's knee high, it's very thick. And if somebody puts you on one of those in a cold basement, no matter how many blankets you put on top of yourself, you're still really cold because it's sucking the heat from underneath you. You got to put blankets under your body as well as over your body to keep warming up on an air mattress like that. Well, so in the state of the art of mattresses, sleeping pads, I believe sometime way back then, the company called Thermarest had the idea of you put some insulation inside an air mattress, and then you could have insulation that will actually spring up and inflate the mattress by itself, self-inflating air mattress, and you turn the little valve shut, or you top it off a little bit by blowing into it, and then that insulation inside the air mattress keeps the air from moving around. Now you can use just a piece of foam underneath you, works as well, because the air can't move inside the foam, but the foam doesn't squeeze down. If you're going to go backpacking, you got this big thick foam to run around with. So the Thermarest was very good in their day because you could roll it up very tightly, squeezing the foam, and then carry that on your backpack that way. But the way that worked, you couldn't really very well fold them lengthwise down the middle. You just had to roll them straight up. So you had this roll as long as the width of your sleeping area, 20 to 25 inches. But those worked quite well. And I had one of those for many, many years. When I first started camping in Philadelphia, I had a Thermarest type of pad. It was one that was all black, which made it especially likable for me. The trouble with those is eventually you get some leaks in one of those. And those were made by 2 layers of fabric that are glued around the edges with the foam inside them. And so when you keep on folding those, eventually you get a little weak spot at the some of the creases there. And so right on the edge where it was glued, the glue comes loose and then it starts to leak, and it's hard to patch right on the edge. So that one eventually died. And I think I was trying I remember Feathercraft, who makes the folding kayaks I had. They had invested in RF welding technology to weld the skins on their newer models. And so it was easy for them to make dry bags and air mattresses and things because they had the equipment for that. So I got a Feathercraft air mattress, but it was just made, with big air chambers inside. It didn't have any insulation, so it didn't work for the wintertime. And so for a while there, I forget what I did, but eventually a company came along known as Exped, E-X-P-E-D. And I can see they put a lot of thought into the design of sleeping pads for backpacking and camping. And their innovation was to put down inside the air mattress. So rather than a Thermarest thing with a foam, it was actual down that would provide the insulation so the air wouldn't move around inside of the pad. But they in designing that, you can't blow up one of those mattresses with your breath because your breath has moisture in it. And the moisture will compromise the down. That's known about sleeping bags. There's ones with natural goose down. If they get wet, they have no insulation ability at all. You'll have to dry them out before they keep you warm at all. So these Exped pads, they came up with a different pump system that wouldn't use your breath. So the first version of it had these little parts on the pad itself that you would push your hands down alternately, and that would pull air into a intake valve, and then you cover it with your hand and push down, and you could. It took about 5 minutes or so with the alternating, pushing your hands down to get the thing to inflate, but it inflated without your breath in there, and it would keep the down from getting moist. And that down insulation would compact far more than foam insulation. So you could squeeze the air out and then fold them lengthwise in half and then roll them up, and you had a good deal smaller than a thermarest type pad for backpacking. Now, when you're kayaking, you don't need something as small, but it's nice to have compact things when you can. And the X-Ped pads, they were made with welding technology, welded around the edges, so that you didn't have the gluing thing that came undone. So they'd worked on getting very tough material that wasn't too heavy. So it was a very well-designed product. They weren't that cheap, but at some point, I decided to get one, and I paid, it was well over $100. These, as I said, these were not cheap. And I found it to be fairly well-designed product. It did keep me warm. It did, the air didn't get chilly underneath you for camping in the wintertime. And I used that for many, many years. I took it to Greenland when I camped out in Greenland. I took it many other places. And I had this till just recently, this past summer. I had taken that with me to go up to Michigan and Minnesota, the Midwest area, between two of the kayak events up there. I was camping out with some folks. And having had this pad for quite a while, it was my trusty sleeping pad. And I found one day, getting up in the morning, how with the old thermarest ones, in the middle of the night, you'd find it kind of lumpy, and then you'd think, oh, I hope it doesn't have a leak in it. Maybe I just didn't close the valve tight enough. But then you'd get up and blow some air into it and tighten up again, and then wake up later on, the same thing happens. So it was very disappointing to have a leak. Well, the X-Ped one, I took care of it. Didn't put it on any thorns or anything that would poke a hole in it. But so it didn't have a leak. It had a problem where that it's made with, there's maybe like six lengthwise tubes that are joined inside, like with sort of baffles inside to form the shape of it. And the center one, the middle divider inside had come loose, and it made the two tubes in the middle form into one big tube. It stuck up like a lump in the middle, running down halfway down the bag. And with my head on that part of the bag, my neck head wanted to roll to one side or the other, like falling down a hill. So it was, in practical terms, no longer a functioning sleeping pad. If you try to decrease the air a little bit, still the weight of the rest of your body would push the air into that one lump in the middle. So it was a problem. So I contacted the X-Ped company, and I explained, I have this bag, and I told them what the problem was. And they said, talk to a woman on the phone. They had a good customer service operation. And she said, well, those bags, you look for, there's a lot number on the bag. So I found this lot number, which tells them when it was produced, or around the time I must have bought it. And so it indicated that I had bought that bag about a little more than 10 years ago. And she said, which sounded about right to me. And she said, those bags are those pads. We have a 5-year warranty on those sleeping pads. So obviously meaning that mine was out of warranty, which is unfortunate. But then she said, for bags purchased in the U.S., we are honoring the warranty beyond the 5-year period. Sounded good to me. So she said, take a photograph of the bag and send us the photo. So I did that. I said, man, if I get a new bag out of this for nothing, these people are all right. So I sent them the photo showing, the lump in the middle, the way it was come apart inside. And they contacted me back, and they said, okay, we want you to take a permanent marker, and we're giving you this RA number, return authorization number. We want you to take the marker and write this number on the sleeping pad itself. up near where the valves are. Write that there, take a picture of that, and send that to us. I did that, and they sent me a brand new sleeping pad. And this one, by now, I think they sent one even better than the one I had. The models may have changed slightly, but anyway, they sent me $250 retail, that thing was. Sent it to me for free. Now, I can stand behind the XPED company. That is a together operation. They're honoring their products like that. So I have good things to say about XPED. And so I still have the old bag. If I sleep with my head at the other end, I could still sort of use it, but that separation in size is probably going to work its way all the way down to the other end. But I've got one sort of functional sleeping pad and another brand new one. So I'm looking pretty good. And in looking at the new design of the new sleeping pad I have from XPED, I see they've made some improvements. So they don't have the pump thing where you have to push with your hands alternately and it takes 5 minutes or so. They scrapped that idea. Now they have a system where you take it looks like a dry bag, but it's very thin, so it's small and light. And it's got a little nozzle that comes out the bottom of it. And you attach that to the intake of the sleeping pad. And then you open up the dry bag and sort of get it full of air and then roll the top of it shut. And then roll it down and it squeezes all that air out through the nozzle and into the bag. And it takes, three or four of those times of squeezing it through the bag and you get the thing inflated. It's quite an efficient system. It's faster than the other way. And it's still, you don't have to breathe into your bag and ruin the downward moisture. So it's a good improvement in the design there. And I see they have also taken the 6 or 8 internal tubes that run the length of the pad. The ones on the outside are a little bit thicker than the ones in the middle. The one I had that went bad, the middle thing became a huge double one because the two went together when the internal divider failed. But so they have the ones on the outside are just a little bit taller. And that serves to keep you from rolling off the edge of it, which is a thing that happens if you don't have your tent on level ground. You tend to slide off the bag. And so there are various systems people have tried to devise of keeping yourself from coming off the pad. But they're not too thick, so it gets lumpy if you move to one side, but just enough to give you a little bit of an edge to keep you from falling off the pad. So with one of those XPED pads and a good down sleeping bag, which is what I use, I stay fairly warm. And the mummy bags have the part that comes all over your head, and you can pull the little string down to tighten it around your face. And they have little baffles or various little Velcro things in there, which is, I find you can figure those out on your own pretty well if it's cold enough. You're in desperation, you'll find a way how to get those to work properly. If a system like that doesn't keep you warm, the alternative involves external heat beyond what your body makes to get you warm. And this is what the Scoutmaster did those years ago at that cold camp out with the rocks and the fire thing. Now, I've never gone to that level, but maybe that's because I saw what happened in that instance. The Scoutmaster trying so valiantly to keep his scouts with homemade sleeping bags warm, he managed to burn holes. It would singe the material because the rock was so hot. It didn't catch on fire, but it just burned. You get up in the morning, there's a bunch of holes in the bottom of the sleeping bag because that's where the rocks were. So it's tricky to get the temperature of the rock just right, so it's hot enough to give you some heat, but not so hot that it starts to burn through your sleeping bag. And I remember reading in the Boy Scout handbook that the ultimate in luxury for outdoor wintertime sleeping warm, it described it. And we never actually tried this, but the idea was it was called the chimney draft bed. And you take some, say, green twigs, sticks and things, so green so they won't burn too much. And you make like a platform. You're trying to make like a cot, and then you're putting branches over that, green branches hopefully. So you've got an elevated platform, but just a few inches off the ground. But you do this somewhere where you've got maybe a trench or a sort of a hillside thing, so you can make a fire and have it sort of diverted so the smoke from the fire goes into the channel under where you're sleeping. And so it's like you're sleeping on a horizontal chimney. Now, to get this to work right, to get the thing to draft properly and the smoke to go where it's supposed to go is not, I would imagine that's fraught with errors. It's just not going to work. But if done properly, that's supposed to keep you nice and warm. And you can imagine it would. I mean, sleeping on a chimney is going to, next to a chimney, the heat would come off the chimney. The trouble being, if you don't have it regulated properly, or if it gets a little too hot, something's going to catch on fire and you're going to wake up on fire. So it could be a dangerous thing, which is why you want the green twigs underneath. I can imagine like the high-tech version of that, where you have a little temperature sensor things that divert the smoke away from your bed if it gets too hot, or some little battery-controlled mechanisms in there. But that's probably not going to happen, because the modern way, the modern high-tech version of this thing is they have now sleeping bags or pads or various things with little heating coils in them that you plug into a USB charger device. Like nowadays we have all these, battery module pad power things that'll, charge our cell phones or what have you. So one of those to plug into your sleeping bag with the coils in it, and then the coils stay warm as long as your battery's charged up. And I can see that would be the way with using external heat to keep oneself warm. So there are those alternatives. And I will note, I believe it's a Native American technique whereby you make a sizable fire, let it burn down to coals, which is going to take some time, and then you cover it with dirt and sleep on top of that. And the hot coals underneath just keep you warm. But like the chimney draft method, you have to get it regulated just right so you don't cause a disaster. And especially the chimney draft method, if anybody ever actually did that, or if anybody's still trying to do it, I am telling you, don't do that, all right? It's for liability concerns here. If you want to try that, you're on your own. I bear no responsibility for any problems that may occur. I can give you one much more effective method for not getting cold in the wintertime, which is to not go camping at all. Stay home and wait till the weather gets warmer. If you follow that advice, that helps to maintain. One of the advantages I find for wintertime camping is that those of us who do go camping in the wintertime have far fewer crowds to worry about, and often have the beautiful scenery all to ourselves. All right, it's time for the music segment. I want to tell you about a vocalist from Greenland named Dida. And she first came out with a CD about 2008. The opening track was a song called Akunarit Nuanasut, which translates to Good Times. And this became the hit single from that CD. And there was later a club remix of it with the dance beat emphasized. And now there's going to be a dubside version of it, which goes like this. Oh yeah, that song's got the hit single kind of quality about it, don't you think? So the chorus, Akunarit nuanasut eka mayuasavaka, I will always remember the good times. And the second line ending with Puyo Navyangilaka, I will never forget the good times. I'll give you the translation of some of it. It says, the good things that happened when we were together, I will keep it in me, I will not let them go. Our tears were falling when you and me found out that we could not be together, even though I hope that we can still be good friends. And the chorus, I will always remember the good times, I will never forget the good times. Well, Dida released a follow-up CD after this first one, and the second one was maybe about 10 years ago, came out, and I've got a copy of that. It's also good artistic work. But the unfortunate part about this is, as much as I like this song, Akunurit no Anasut, I cannot tell you how to get a copy of this today. It seems to be out of print. I don't know that there's any YouTube, either video or audio, that has this. And it may be on some other site somewhere on the internet, but I don't know how to find it. But the song is called Akunarit Nuanasut by Dida, and a fine song it is. Coming up in episode 53, well, I've been doing all these special guest interviews and have some more interesting ones to air, so I don't know what the subject for 53 will be yet. I'm still working on that, but I'll tell you what the music will be. I have some more artists from Greenland who sing in English, that I haven't emphasized so far because I prefer the Greenlandic stuff. But as I showed you the guy Angu from a while back who sings his stuff in English, I did a song in English there. So I've got another artist who does most of her stuff in English, so I'll probably do another song in English. So you can be ready for that next time on the Dubcast with Dubside.